Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1944 black comedy directed by Frank Capra, Arsenic and Old Lace. With me are Ken.
George!
And Ted.
This is developing into a very bad habit. I don't know if I can explain it to you. It's not only against the law, it's wrong.
And I'm Eric. Insanity runs in my family. It practically gallops. All right, we're going to be talking about this classic from 1944. Ted, give us the details of this movie.
Okay, Arsenic and Old Lace is directed by Frank Capra. It has a screenplay by Julius and Philip Epstein. It's based off of the 1941 play Arsenic and Old Lace by Joseph Kesserling. It has a running time of 118 minutes. It has a release date of September 23rd, 1944. It had a budget of $1.1 million and had a box office gross of $4.7 million. Arsenic and Old Lace stars Cary Grant as Mortimer Brewster, Priscilla Lane as Elaine Brewster, Josephine Hull as Aunt Abby Brewster, Jean Adair as Aunt Martha Brewster, Raymond Massey as Jonathan Brewster, Peter Lorre as Dr. Herman Einstein, John Alexander as Teddy Roosevelt Brewster, Jack Carson as Officer Patrick O'Hara, John Ridgely as Officer Sanders, Edward McNamara as Police Sergeant Brophy, James Gleason as Police Lieutenant Rooney, Edward Everett Horton as Mr. Witherspoon, Grant Mitchell as Reverend Harper, Vaughn Glazer as Judge Cullum, Chester Clute as Dr. Gilchrist, Edward McWade as Mr. Gibbs, Gary Owen as the taxi cab driver, Charles Lane as the first reporter, Hank Mann as the second reporter, and Spencer Charters as the marriage license clerk.
Well, you named everyone in that movie. What are the reviews of this?
This has a critic score of a certified fresh 85%. And it has an audience score of 92%. It was hard to actually find reviews for this one. There's not very many from the time. I do have a couple here, though. A negative critic that I found was Dave Kerr from the Chicago Reader. He said the timing is abysmal throughout, turning fast pace into numbing frenzy. And on the positive side, we had Derek Smith from Slant magazine. He said Arsenic and Old Lace trenchantly lays bare the hypocrisies and prejudices of the upper middle class that often remain concealed beneath the facade of good manners. The staff of the magazine Variety said, despite the fact that the picture runs 118 minutes, Frank Capra has expanded on the original play to a sufficient extent to maintain a steady, consistent pace.
All right. Well, let's talk about the first time we saw this movie. I'll kick it off here. First time I saw this movie was this week. My virgin ears and eyes have seen this movie. So I'm looking forward to discussing this with all you out there. How about you, Ted?
This is the first time I've seen this movie as well, was this week. Interesting thing, I like Frank Capra and I like Cary Grant. Kind of shocking that I had never seen it before.
I know, right? I've seen a lot of Cary Grant movies. I just never had the opportunity to watch it. Ken, how about you?
I saw this with my mom when I was a young kid. She was a big Cary Grant fan, and she just totally adored him, and so we watched this movie one day. And, you know, as a kid, a lot of this stuff goes over your head, so I just like the zaniness of it, and the reactions of Cary Grant, I just think they were silly as a kid, and I enjoyed it. So I figured I'll pick this one out of the bunch of Frank Capra because it was different than what we've done in the last few movies of his, where it's kind of more of redemption movies or movies with a message. And I don't think this has a message. It's just pure black comedy.
And we can talk about that, absolutely. So, Ken, you want to continue? Tell us the plot of this movie that we're talking about.
I got this plot off of Wikipedia, so here we go. Mortimer Brewster, a writer who has repeatedly denounced marriage as an old-fashioned superstition, falls in love with Ellen Harper. Mortimer and Elaine get married, and Elaine goes to tell her father and pack for the honeymoon, while Mortimer returns to his aunts, Abby and Martha, who have raised him in the old family home. Mortimer has a brother named Teddy, who believes he is Theodore Roosevelt. He resides with them, and each time Teddy goes up the stairs, he yells, "Charge!" and runs up the stairs, imitating Roosevelt's famous 1898 Charge Up San Juan Hill. Searching for the notes for his next book, Mortimer finds a corpse hidden in the window seat. He assumes in horror that Teddy's delusions have led him to murder, but Abby and Martha cheerfully explain that they are responsible. You see, Abby and Martha are serial killers. They minister to lonely old bachelors by ending their suffering. They post a room for rent sign to attract a victim, then serve a glass of elberry wine, spike it with poison, while getting acquainted with them. Then the bodies are buried in the basement by Teddy, who believes they are yellow fever victims who have perished in the building of the Panama Canal. While Mortimer digests this information, his brother Jonathan arrives with his alcoholic accomplice, plastic surgeon Dr. Herman Einstein. Jonathan is also a serial killer trying to escape from the police and dispose of his latest victim. Jonathan's face has been altered by Einstein while Einstein was drunk. Jonathan now resembles Boris Karloff's Frankenstein monster. Jonathan learns his aunt's secret and proposes to bury his victim in the cellar. Abby and Martha object because their victims were nice gentlemen, while Jonathan's victim is a stranger and a foreigner. Jonathan also declares his intention to kill Mortimer. Elaine is impatient to leave for the honeymoon, but is concerned about Mortimer's increasingly odd behavior as he frantically attempts to control the situation. He tries unsuccessfully to alert the bumbling police to Jonathan's presence. To draw attention away from his aunts and deprive them of their willing but uncomprehending accomplice, Mortimer tries to file paperwork to have Teddy legally committed to a mental asylum. Worrying that the genetic predisposition for mental illness resides within him, Mortimer explains to Elaine that he can't remain married to her. Eventually, Jonathan is arrested. Einstein flees after signing Teddy's commitment papers. Teddy is safely co-signed in an institution, and his aunts insist upon joining him. Upon hearing that Mortimer has signed the commitment papers as next of kin, Abby and Martha are concerned they may be nulled and void. They inform Mortimer that he's not a Brewster after all. His mother was the family cook, and his father was a chief on a steamship. Relieved, he lustily kisses Elaine and whisks her off to their honeymoon. The end. So I guess we'll start this movie from the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
So at the beginning of the movie, it's Halloween. And for some reason, we're going to start off with a Brooklyn, New York baseball game. I'm not really sure where we're going with this at the first part. I don't know why it's entered in there. It really has no effect on the movie whatsoever. First of all, baseball is probably not going to be played on October 31st. At least not then. Probably not Brooklyn and New York together. It is just an odd thing. And then on top of that, I guess it's supposed to play off as comedy. Like, it'll be a cold day in October when Brooklyn makes it to play baseball. And then on top of that, you have the Brooklyn player striking out and then punching out the umpire.
Yeah, and then the bench is clear and everyone just goes for like a free-for-all. I always love to see the Brooklyn Dodgers playing baseball, but you're right. In this movie, I'm not sure. I was watching this going, where are we going with this? How does this even play into the movie at all?
It would have made more sense if you had like multiple stories and then going into this, but you only had one weird outcast story and then you start off the new story. If you maybe did 2 or 3 weird things that were happening on Halloween, very short, then maybe I can buy that a little bit, but it just seems way out of place here.
It seems a very forced joke, if the joke is what they're truly going for. Because this is when the Brooklyn Dodgers were known as Dem Bums. That's what they were called, because they could never make the World Series. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Maybe it made more sense in the 1940s. Well,
but
this is made in 1941.
Outside of New York, would it have been funny?
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know.
We just don't really know.
It's an inside joke at the time we just don't get.
It's lost something. Ken, until you brought this up, we were talking entering into the podcast today. Until you said that, it has no place in the movie. It's just kind of very odd.
Kind of there.
Weird.
I don't know if this is because it's hastily edited, because when this movie was finished, we were entering World War II. In fact, December 7th, of course, is Pearl Harbor, and they were just wrapping up filming this movie, and they were going into the editing of this movie. Frank Capra had to ask for extension to finish off the movie before he went to war.
Right.
He's very patriotic, and he jumped at the chance to serve his country. So they gave him additional time to do that, but there was no reshoots, and that would have been something he probably would have done as reshoots, probably a different type of editing. And a joke in 1941 isn't the same joke in 1944. I don't know if that's the case, because I don't know if Brooklyn still sucked for the next few more years and still were called the Bums up until that time.
Well, I think it was 1949 was the first time they made the World Series. It was after Jackie Robinson joined the team is when they started to actually get good.
Yeah, and Robinson was 47.
And they did play the Yankees a handful of times in the World Series. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We probably discussed it longer than we probably even should have.
We really discussed it longer than it was in the movie. It's in the movie for like 2 minutes. It's not
Capra's
a big deal.
like, move on already.
You know, it might be a sense of the fact that this is a different type of movie that Frank Capra is doing anyway. He's been doing these patriotic films with some type of message, and this movie really has no message.
Well, I couldn't imagine that this was part of the play.
None of the stuff that was outside happened. So the baseball game is fabricated. The main play, the original play, was really focused on the aunts. There was a Mortimer character, but he was built up more for Cary Grant than he was originally intended to.
We have two great writers that put this on the screen, the Epstein brothers, who ended up going on to write Casablanca. These guys are pretty adept at transferring something from a play to the big screen. You had mentioned the cutting of this movie and the filming. I don't know if he would have done any reshoots on this, because what I was kind of reading said that he was pretty happy with how this movie turned out. And we'll talk later. There was one in particular person that was not happy with how this movie turned out and was very vocal about it and got shut down pretty hard from Warner Brothers and Frank Capra that, no, we're not going to reshoot anything.
Well, we could talk about that now.
Cary Grant hated this
Cary
movie.
Grant, that's right.
He hated his portrayal in this movie. He said it was the worst thing that he ever did. He never had anything nice to say about this.
And that's why I think it would have been edited, because Frank Capra, at least from the documentaries that I've listened to and books that I've read on Frank Capra, he had promised Cary Grant that there was going to be reshoots and that he was going to edit it in a way that it wasn't so over the top. Because Frank Capra wanted him to play over the top, but he had promised Cary Grant that it would be adjusted later on in the editing room and with reshoot. Like I said, because of the war, that never happened. So I do believe they would have done it, but I don't know how much more they would have done. And as far as Cary Grant goes, Cary Grant's never done comedy like this. I mean, he's done some comedic roles, but he does it more like a straight man type of comedic role. He's not a gifted comic. However, most of the reviews that were out there actually enjoyed him in this particular role. And I did for the most part. I mean, there are a couple of scenes there that kind of make me cringe a little bit with him. The way he treats his new wife throughout the movie once he finds out about his aunts doesn't make any sense to me. He's unnecessarily rude to her and a little bit too over the top, especially with her. Everywhere else, I'm kind of okay, but that relationship just doesn't make sense. And that might be because of the rules back then of how decent a film needed to be. Because originally this was planned that they weren't running off to Niagara Falls, they were running off to have sex. Because it's their honeymoon and they've been waiting to have sex. But the rating system at that time didn't want to allude to any of that. That's why they were saying things like, well, we're going to go to Niagara Falls and get dropped down in the barrel. They were finding ways to say what they were going to do without saying it.
So, Ken, I know in this movie, it was originally, I believe, Bob Hope was supposed to play the Cary Grant role, or he wanted Bob Hope to play it. Is there any reason, or is there anything that you know to why Jimmy Stewart did not play this role? I asked that because as I was watching this movie early on, all I saw was Jimmy Stewart and not Cary Grant. All the mannerisms were very much Jimmy Stewart-ish, so I wasn't sure if this thing was actually written for Jimmy Stewart, kind of like his past movies.
Never heard that Jimmy Stewart was ever really considered for it. I think Cary Grant thought that Jimmy Stewart would be a better fit in this particular movie, and I totally disagree with Cary Grant.
Oh, I agree with Cary Grant.
I don't, because Jimmy Stewart doesn't have that kind of comedic timing either. It would have been miscast. I would agree with Bob Hope or Jack Benny being in part of these roles. That it fits more of their comedy type of style. I don't know if they were ever considered for it as well. I think they wanted Cary Grant all along because he was a big name. And they wrote the part bigger for this character because they wanted Cary Grant. So I think it was always going to be Cary Grant to begin with. So I really don't think there was really much debate. The one character that they really, really wanted was Boris Karloff because he was in the actual play, and he was actually going to play Jonathan. And the running joke in the play is that Jonathan looks like Boris Karloff.
Right.
So,
right. And he gave permission to use his name in the movie.
Because they wouldn't release him from the Broadway play to go film it.
Right.
That's a real big, kind of a crap move that I don't see what the benefit that the Broadway production would have had from preventing him from going and filming this. I would think that that would bring more attention to the Broadway play, considering that 3 of the other main characters are played by people who played their parts originally on Broadway. I just want to say this. I never in my wildest imagination would have thought that these words were going to come out of my mouth. I can't stand Cary Grant in this movie. The over-the-top, it's borderline horrible.
Wow, you're really going early on the review here, aren't you? Can't hold back, can you?
It seems so beneath him, the way he portrays this character. I think there's a way this character could be portrayed, and I'm having a hard time determining whether or not this is Frank Capra's fault or if this is Cary Grant's fault. But I can't stand him in this movie. I think the way that he treats his newlywed wife, he's the one that's psychotic. And he's probably the craziest person there. And that's saying something, considering one guy thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt and keeps running up the stairs.
And the rest of the family are killers.
He acts like a maniac. And here's the one of the other things that really got me. If you're going to break the fourth wall and have a character interact with the audience, go the whole way. Have them talk to the audience. Don't do this pantomime-looking thing at the audience like they're interacting with you.
I never caught that.
Oh, he does it. He does it numerous times where he's looking at the audience.
To?
It's usually after something crazy happens. Like he opens up the box and he looks directly in the camera at the audience.
Oh, the window seat?
Yeah, that's just one time. And then there's another time where something is said between 2 characters and it garnered a reaction from him, but he doesn't react to the characters that say it. He looks at us to let us know that he knows that it's just infinitely frustrating.
You're reading into that. I don't think he's totally addressing the audience. I don't think he's trying to break the fourth wall. At least, I don't know. I just never caught that where I thought the fourth wall was trying to even be broken. There's sometimes where he mumbles to himself and he's talking to himself throughout the whole film. Sometimes he looks down, sometimes he looks up, sometimes he looks strictly in the camera. I think maybe you're reading a little bit more into that than maybe...
Well, then what's he doing by looking directly into the camera? He's looking at us. There's nobody else he's interacting with.
He can't ever look straight?
But no, he's not interacting with anybody else on screen. It's only him on screen looking directly into the camera.
So what happens when he looks up or down? That's fine when he's talking like that?
Yeah, because there he's acting like he's talking to himself and doing things like that. He's directly interacting with the audience. I think part of the problem here too, this is a case where these characters, they have to pop. If you're in a play, the characters have to be larger than life and to come off of the stage. And here's a case where the characters just, especially Mortimer, it plays way too big for the silver screen rather than what you would see in real life on a stage, that it has to be that way. This didn't have to be played the way it was played. And there are a lot of parts of this movie that I like and I actually find funny, but Cary Grant, it's cringeworthy. I was really taken aback by how over the top it was. And the omission of not having Boris Karloff, the guy who played Jonathan, I give him a lot of credit. He is pretty good, but it would have been funnier if he would have been Boris Karloff.
So why did the doctor drunkenly mess up his face? Was he trying to alter his face so the police or anyone couldn't recognize him?
That's what I took from it.
Okay.
He
Taken from the whole
escaped
thing.
from a mental institution. He's
In
running
South Bend, right?
Yeah, so
Right.
he's running from the law. What do people do in the 40s when they're running from the law? They're getting plastic surgery. We see Humphrey Bogart do it. It just seemed like that was what people did in the 30s and 40s when they're running from the law, is get plastic surgery. And
In real life, John Dillinger is said to have had it done.
as far as the man who played Jonathan, that's Raymond Massey, who was also Abraham Lincoln and Abe Lincoln in Illinois. He was also a stage actor for the same role, which he was nominated for an Academy Award for the movie role. In fact, when you see like the shadow of his face talking to Peter Lorre, I almost feel like Abraham Lincoln's talking to him. But the way that Boris Karloff would have played the role would have been a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, whereas this one is kind of played a little bit more straight, more villain type with no comedic timing whatsoever. But I will say, I did jump the first time I saw this, and recently, when he comes through the window, when the ants are going to look at the body that they killed in the windowsill, he comes through bringing in the luggage, he opens up those drapes, and boom, I was scared. Actually, I popped back a little bit. That was pretty scary, even for this day and age.
Is it the original jump scare?
It's probably
Yeah,
not the
but-
original jump scare, but it definitely is a jump scare, for sure.
You
I
have
wish
a couple
I would have
of
had
them.
that reaction.
Yeah, you have a couple of them here. You have the one that Ken's talking about, and you have the cat meow, come to the door.
Back on Cary Grant, I understand why, Ted, you feel a certain way about that, because Cary Grant also feels the same way about it. But most of the critics really liked his performance, and most of the audience scores even prove that. They really do like this movie. I do think, like I said, it is over the top at times, but this character needs to be over the top. And why? He lives with a family of insane people. His aunts are insane. His brothers are insane. He just can't be normal. He even writes plays about how marriage is a joke. He has a screw loose in there, and he plays it with a little bit of a screw loose even before all these bad things happen. We see him over at the courthouse getting a marriage license and trying to hide from everybody, and how crazy he is even in line there, trying to whisper his name and then screams out his name. And then when he gets married, they come back and they're like playing a cute little cat and mouse game in the graveyard. If anything, the character is consistent throughout the movie. It's not like all of a sudden he goes insane and goes crazy.
He's consistent from beginning to the end.
It probably should have been played more straight. It should have been focused more on the ants. Maybe a reaction here and there. I actually like the reaction that he has when he first sees the body in the windowsill.
I can get behind that. I guess one of the problems that I have is everybody else seems to have, even though their characters are kind of large and come off of the screen, it seems like everybody else is kind of playing their part dialed down a little bit. To steal a term from another movie we reviewed, Cary Grant's turned up to 11. And everybody else is kind of between a 6 and an 8. He comes off manic. I don't know. It didn't fit. The guy that I really like, I like him in almost everything he does. I love Peter Lorre. I think Peter Lorre is really great. Peter Lorre knows how to play this tongue-in-cheek. He knows the timing of how to get this down. Whereas Cary Grant's just 110% all the way. Whereas Peter Lorre, the things happen, but he makes his comments.
It's a professional comic actor versus a non-professional comic actor. We could argue that Peter Lorre would have been better for the Mortimer Report because of the way he is. I mean, the voice and everything kind of works for somebody a little bit more on the edge.
It's actually funny because the first time we meet Jonathan and he's talking, I thought Peter Lorre was talking for him.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I actually did.
An overgrown puppet.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I actually saw Massey's mouth moving that I was like, oh, that's not Peter Lorre talking for him. I thought it was kind of like an inner dialogue type of a thing that Peter Lorre was doing. I was like, this dude's mouth's not moving. He's talking.
That's funny. That reminds me of when Cary Grant says, oh, he talks. Like, because when he first sees him, he just thinks that he's some type of, like, monster. Doesn't realize it's his brother.
Well, I'd be curious to see what he looked like before. Everyone's like, "You're
Well,
not
they
Jonathan."
show that picture. I mean, he looks all
Yeah.
weird and stuff.
When he was a
and
little
Yeah.
kid.
He
Yeah.
was a
Well,
little
when he was a
kid.
kid, right? But I
Yeah.
mean, like right before the surgery, just something, some kind of like a flashback before the surgery was done, maybe escaping from the jail in South Bend, or before Dr. Einstein goes into his drunken stupor of operation.
They sure have gotten around. Barcelona, Melbourne,
Yeah,
London, and then South Bend.
and then South Bend and Chicago. I know, right? Yeah.
One of these things isn't like the others.
The Johnny Cash of serial killers, I guess.
It's interesting. They're crazy.
Peter Lorre, though, you just can't help but like his character. He's one of the bad guys here. Granted, he's trying to stop these murders from happening. He's trying to be the conscience of Jonathan, but Jonathan is just totally insane. I'm not a big fan of the Jonathan character because of the fact that he's just murder and getting away with it is the only thing on his mind. I wish there was a little bit more comedy in him. And I think if we would have had Boris Karloff in there, I think we would have seen a little bit more, like I said earlier, tongue-in-cheek type of role being played. But Peter Lorre, Teddy going over to him and telling him about his plan to go to the Panama Canal and all that other stuff. And he's just playing along with them. He doesn't care. It's not like all the other characters trying to understand where he's coming from. He just right along with it, and it's normal.
Peter Lorre is the only character that doesn't question Teddy or doesn't question anybody else about why Teddy thinks that he's Teddy Roosevelt. He just goes along with the whole bit. He never even gives a side eye to any other character about, is this guy for real? He just goes along with it. It's actually pretty funny.
I think the reason for that is that Frank Capra gave Peter Lorre free reign to ad-lib whenever he wanted to. That's the thing you want to do with him because he's such a gifted actor. And up to this time, he had been stuck in making these Mr. Moto movies, and he was doing these gangster movies and things of that nature. But when he first came on to be in the movies and things of that nature, he was a comic actor. This is like a return to that. We get to see a little bit more of it later on in his career and things like The Raven with Vincent Price.
And in Looney Tunes.
He's so gifted. It's a shame that he died as young as he did, but just a brilliant actor. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything that I disliked. Anywhere from Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original one, not the one with Jimmy Stewart, into Casablanca, which we see a few years later. Very happy to see him here. But I also think, though, that Teddy's played to 11 as well. I will say this, when my wife came in and heard that charge every single time, she's like, is this movie almost over? Because she was so sick and tired of hearing charge.
My wife watched this movie with me, too, and she's like, what's going on with the charge? So I had to explain to her.
My wife had a similar take on that. I think in smaller doses, the Teddy character works. I actually find some of it kind of amusing. And it's one of the parts, I know that it got on Eric's nerves, but they do the charge thing too many times. But it's like, there's the episode of The Simpsons that talks about when Krusty, he keeps stepping on the rake and hitting himself. I guess it's the comedic rule of 3 and 14. 3 times it's funny, after the 3rd time it's not, until you've done it like 14 times. I guess that is a tried and true thing of comedy.
But they didn't do it 14 times.
They
in this
didn't
movie,
do it
right?
14
okay.
times.
Okay.
Yeah, but more than 3 is too much.
Too much.
Like, for instance, I went golfing with Ted one time, and he kept on running over my golf ball.
But that was funny.
First couple of times, it's funny. The 5th or 6th time, it gets kind of annoying. So it's kind of in the same vein.
Well,
all right.
Hey. But
I had to get that out. It's been on my nerves for about 10 years now, and I needed to talk about it. It's still a good performance. The Teddy role, like when he's not doing the charge, I kind of believe that he's Teddy Roosevelt.
You really think that he thinks that he's Teddy Roosevelt?
I love the way he just presents himself. It's very dignified.
When I was watching this, the character he reminded me of in one of my favorite sitcoms from the late 70s, Soap, from Susan Harris, the father, who's the World War II general who still thinks he's in World War II.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the character that he reminded me of because he played it so seriously. He never broke character. He was always Teddy Roosevelt.
Very interesting how the ants are manipulating him to do their will with the Panama Canal.
But it's all historically accurate. He's taken the yellow fever victims. That is something that I found amusing. I actually like his character. He just does the charge thing too many times.
Yeah.
When he's not doing the charge thing, he is very funny. It's a very funny role. And
Right.
definitely needed.
Oh, I definitely agree. His interactions with everybody that in the movie actually work really well, whether it be the ants or with Peter Lorre or even Mortimer. It doesn't matter who he's interacting with or with the cops. He has to take back the one ship because that's going to Australia. But I think the interaction with him and the ants, because the ants are really the main focus of the movie, or should be the main focus of the movie. The fact that the first person that dies is not a murder. He has a heart attack. He's lonely. He looks peaceful. The two ants look at him and they go, that's what these lonely people need. They need to be at peace. And it just drives them crazy. And then you have Teddy that comes up and sees him dead in the chair and goes, yellow fever. And then that's when the burying of these individuals start to happen. And then the ants have this idea that they're now responsible to basically make that happen for every lonely man that comes into their house.
My question is this: why do they bury him in the basement and not in the graveyard next door?
I think it's because Teddy believes that downstairs is the Panama Canal, and
Gotcha.
and that's the only way they're going to get
All
them to
right.
actually dig the hole.
And the ground's a lot
Because-
softer in the basement than it is outside.
He does think the cemetery next door is Arlington National
And
Cemetery.
these aren't war heroes.
Another secondary character that I really liked was the police lieutenant. Even though they kind of sell him out and with the writing, because he comes on the screen and he kind of acts like an audience member, where he's like, you all are out of your mind. One person that I'm looking at here that's anybody that's sane. And they kind of manipulate him even, but I did like him. I did like his portrayal. The other cops I did not care for, but it's the lieutenant at the end.
Yeah, Lieutenant Rooney. Basically a role that he's well known for, those type of characters. How silly, though, does it get when it gets to the point where not one, not two, but three or more people are telling you that there's bodies in the basement?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where
writing
Cary
sells-
Grant plays the loony card up to 11.
And on purpose to try to take his mind off of what's in the basement.
Right,
Which
and so the writing sells the lieutenant's character down the river there.
I'm wondering if that's the case because of the writing partners having to write up all the way to the end. Because this was an 8-week shoot, and
Maybe.
they were running out of time. I wonder if they rushed the ending. Because the ending to me seems a little rushed. My biggest problem with this whole movie is the last line. I'm a teapot by the cab driver. I enjoy this movie, and all of a sudden that just takes me out. I am happy the movie's over now because I think that the movie keeps on going after that line. I'm afraid that I'm not going to enjoy myself any longer.
They could have done without his character altogether.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind that he's out there waiting and waiting and waiting.
Why would a New York City cab driver continue to wait outside of somebody's house?
Because he's getting paid. The guy who he's waiting for is actually a well-known playwright who has money. I understand why he stays. I do like the part where he gets him a cab accidentally. That's kind of funny. But outside of that, he really is a useless character.
Yeah.
I would rather have seen what they had planned originally was at the end, the ants actually, they were going to kill Mr. Witherspoon. He's at the institution, and Cary Grant is talking to him, and when Cary Grant's leaving, says, "Say how your ants. I'm going to see him this week. I've been feeling really lonely lately." He's like, "No, you don't tell him that. Don't tell him that you're lonely." And he goes into that question about, "You don't drink, do you?" And he's like, "No, I never touch stuff except for wine, And so, don't drink that either." Or one of the endings was supposed to have them try to kill him at the end. I would have liked to seen that at the end. Them trying to still try to kill somebody repeatedly throughout the movie. Maybe if it's him trying to stop the ants from trying to kill another person, maybe that would be a little bit more easier on the Cary Grant character.
You mean like a running gag throughout the whole movie?
Yes.
Yeah, it probably would have helped.
Because that would have drove him more insane. I can understand more of his reactions a little bit more because of the fact that all he's trying to do is keeping them from killing somebody. In a way, that's what he's trying to do. That's why he's trying to get Teddy locked up, because he thinks if he takes Teddy, who's going to dig the graves for them, away, they don't have a way to bury these men, so they won't end up killing anybody anymore. That's his goal.
Okay. Well, that was never really explained.
It was, but it's very easy to miss. He does kind of explain why he's trying to do it.
Watched the
but not
movie
in very
3 times, and I missed it every time.
Yeah, that's the reason for it. He figures, to get Teddy out of the way, and they will stop what they're doing. And then he's excited when they want to go with him. So, because then that takes care of everything.
They realize they're going into an insane asylum, right?
Yeah,
All three
that's
of them?
what I was that's what I was
Yeah.
going to say.
Well, Teddy doesn't, but the sisters have to know.
Sisters care about Teddy. They love
Yeah.
Teddy, and they even said they don't want to put Teddy in an institution until they're gone.
Right.
Once they're gone, they will let Teddy go, but they're there for him. So they really do love Teddy a lot, and I think that's why they're willing to go there.
Let's spitball this, okay? Let's say they do go to the insane asylum with Teddy. Aren't they just going to kill willy-nilly in the insane asylum?
They won't have their elderberry wine with arsenic and cyanide and all the poisons available.
But she's a renowned mixologist or whatever.
But she won't have access to it.
But maybe she will. In real life, that's not a good thing, but in the black comedy, that could be a little bit more fun.
A sequel.
I do like the ants.
They're sweet. They're awesome.
They're sweet. I don't like the little run thing that the one does, but that's okay.
Like when she goes gets the door and stuff, it's
Yeah,
just a little... Yeah.
But as far as them as characters, I think they're pretty funny. I think their subdued nature and their calmness just amplifies Cary Grant's character even further because they're so calm. Like I said, he's like at 11. It is kind of funny. Their motivations are interesting. I do like the ladies who play them.
I think the reason why he also freaks out the way he does, he sees how his brother turned out, both of his brothers turned out, and he knows the family history of mental illness in the family. He is holding on that the aunts are not crazy. That's his last hope, that he's not crazy. And I think that's another reason why he tries to get Teddy out of there, is because if he thinks that he goes away, that the ants return to normal, then he can be normal.
He doesn't admit that they're crazy until they want to go to the insane asylum, and Witherspoon tells him that they can't, and he goes, we can't let sane people in, and he looks at him and goes, well,
yeah,
like, they're not real sane.
Like I said, I understand about maybe Cary Grant just a little bit off on the character. I don't think he's way off. I don't think he does a bad job. I think there are people that could have done it better. But there are times where I do like his character. I do like some of the looks. I know they're crazy, oddball looks. Like, for instance, Eric said Jimmy Stewart. I don't think Jimmy Stewart could pull off that kind of look that Cary Grant did.
Oh, I care to differ. I think this role was made for Jimmy Stewart.
I just don't see it at all. I agree, like I said, with Bob Hope and Jack Benny. I think both of them would have the perfect look.
Talk about breaking the fourth wall. It would have been perfect for Jack Benny. I still could see Jimmy Stewart pulling this one off. Not saying I'd like it, but I could definitely see him in this role. In fact, I saw him in this role as I was watching it.
He does a movie called Harvey, but the way he does Harvey, he's toned down. Completely toned down. His character is crazy, but he plays it straight. Jimmy Stewart, if he plays this role, has to play it like he does in Harvey. It's more of a straight role where he's more of an observer trying to fix everything. But really, I don't see anything coming out of Jimmy Stewart that would provide comic relief in the movie. Cary Grant is a little bit better here than Jimmy Stewart would have been in this movie. I would have liked to seen a little bit more of the pastor. We see him a little bit. I would have liked to seen a little bit more of him being involved because he disapproves of the marriage. I almost feel like that character is really not even needed. We don't even really need to see the minister if you're not
I thought they were going to kill him.
Yeah, maybe if he comes back later and says that he's lonely, or I just don't understand the reason for even the character even to be there. You know, other than didn't have the time to put the body in the basement because the minister came over. But you could have just skipped that whole scene. And then this movie could have been a little bit even shorter. I mean, but the ladies who play the ants, they're hilarious. And they work really well together. I buy them as lifelong sisters that think alike. Yeah, they think alike.
Literally. Old maids. Absolutely.
The only thing I didn't get, at first we were believing that there's three brothers, but we find out Mortimer he's not a Brewster. But then what happened to his mother and his father? His mother was a cook. Did she die? Did she leave? And then he just stayed? What happened to the father?
I thought the aunt's parents not want the cook to leave. I thought they killed him.
Well, he wasn't there. He wasn't there.
This is the family tradition.
He wasn't there. The mom was there.
Right. I thought they killed her.
Well, they don't kill women. They only kill men. So in that case, if the brothers believed that that was their brother, are they all even related in any type of way whatsoever? Are all three of those just grew up as little boys in that house without a mother? Maybe they were dropped off there because we know that the aunts got a big size inheritance from their father. So they have money. We know Mortimer's mom was their maid. We know their father was a cook on, I want to say, steamliner. but I don't know who the parents are of the other two. Is Teddy one of their kids? They really don't say. So maybe Teddy belongs to one of the two sisters, and that's why they have to stick with Teddy. Maybe Teddy's really their only kid. Maybe Jonathan and Mortimer are related. So it does get a little confusing of who's related and how they're related and what happened to the parents and why do they live with the aunts and all that good stuff.
I think that Jonathan and Teddy are Brewsters because,
right.
I mean, they're both
crazy.
insane. Yeah, they're both insane. This is kind of like the family tradition that the Brewsters just kill people. It goes back to the guy who came over on the Mayflower and he scalped the Indians instead of
the Indians
scalping him. But
not the best joke in the world, no.
We need to add a snare drum to this podcast.
Yeah, there's a lot of those type of little jokes like this. Because I've been trying to sit here and think about who I would have rather have seen play Mortimer. I've never been the biggest Bob Hope fan. I mean, he's funny, but he needs somebody to play off of. It was him and Ben Crosby.
Well, yeah, the ants.
And he doesn't have a straight guy.
He doesn't need a straight guy. He's done movies like Son of Paleface, where he's a funny actor. I guess he does need a partner, but he doesn't have to be like a Bing Crosby.
I can kind of see what Eric's talking about with Jimmy Stewart to a certain extent, but
Gary Cooper would have fit this better than Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, somebody like him, I think.
I can see a Gary Cooper doing this, yeah.
I don't
know. But if
know.
you would have told me that, hey, this movie, Frank Capra wrote this role for his buddy, Jimmy Stewart, like he's done for so many other movies, but Jimmy Stewart couldn't be in the movie for whatever reason, and he had to get someone else to do it. He had to get Cary Grant to do it. I would believe that the role was written for Jimmy Stewart.
And the funny thing about the plot and everything, I mean, this is loosely based on a true story that happened about a woman who actually ran a kind of like an old folks home. Basically killed off her own husband and then started killing off the clients and things of that nature, but then forced them to sign over a will first before doing so. And then
it's like a darker version of Say Anything.
Yeah, it's a darker version of Say Anything, exactly. And so the play came kind of from that. And like I said earlier, this play is really more focused on the two aunts. This was actually built up for Cary Grant. So I read this. The reason why it was built up is only because they were able to get Cary Grant in this role. Because he was hot and they needed a hot actor to boost up ticket sales. Because the actors that you had without him don't sell tickets.
Now, Ted, you mentioned earlier on in the podcast that Cary Grant hated the role and that he angered the studios, correct? So he was very vocal before this movie was finalized or during or after?
Yeah, he would have seen like an early cut of the movie.
Did he want Capra not to release it?
Yeah, he petitioned Warner Brothers not to release the movie. But the problem was, a week after Capra was done with editing this movie, he was off to war, and he couldn't come back and re-edit the movie. Warner Brothers was hundreds of thousands of dollars into the movie already, but they had to go forward. And it was under great protest that the movie was released in the condition that it is. He hated this particular role. He thought he was way too over the top. And I don't disagree.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you either. I agree with you. This role it was not written for Cary Grant's benefit. I don't think you need to petition the studio. I mean, it's not the worst role, but definitely not his best. I don't think it hurt his career, obviously.
No,
he went on to do many other movies, but I can definitely see why he would look upon this role in his career and say, you know what, this is my least favorite role.
See, I guess this is part of my problem, and where I think kind of the blame kind of lands on Frank Capra here. There's a way that he plays this role where it's not so glaringly over the top. I mean, if he just dials it back just a little bit, I think the role might actually fit, and he doesn't do necessarily a bad job. I think it's a good story.
I can't it was a great play to see at the time with Boris Karloff, and it's probably a phenomenal play.
Like I said, these characters, they're characters that pop off of a stage, and that's what is needed when you're seeing a live play, is characters that come at you. Whereas you don't need that when you're watching a movie. You don't need the characters to pop off the screen like you do if you're seeing them live.
The last thing I'll say about Cary Grant in this role, it's not that he wanted or did not want this role. He was up for a different role in another movie called The Man Who Came to Dinner, one of my favorite movies that I loved. He was going to play a character called Whiteside. Well, Whiteside was in the theater played by a different actor, and they wanted that actor to be in the movie. So they kicked Cary Grant out of the movie, and Warner Brothers said, okay, well, if that happens, then you have to put Cary Grant into this movie. And that's how Cary Grant got the role
Interesting.
in Arsenic and Old Lace, is because of that. Frank Capra was the director of the time. He's probably the greatest director at this moment. And so I think Cary Grant was relying on Capra to help him make this role his, and like I said earlier...
Well, Capra didn't go off to war, it might have been a different movie.
Well, that's the thing, it was December 12th. Frank Capra signed up in the Army while they were still shooting the movie. And at that time, though, he told them that he needed 6 more weeks to edit the movie. I think we could have had a little bit better movie than what we get. And I still like the movie. I still think Cary Grant doesn't do a bad performance here. But I think it would have been at least slightly better if more care was taken with this movie. And here's the other thing. It doesn't get released for another couple of years. It doesn't get released to 1944. The shooting ends in mid-December of 41. And they probably hold it because of the war. Why would you want to release a movie when a lot of people are off to war or people are more focused on other things than going to the movies?
Yeah, I think the release date here is an awful interesting thing because you look at the movies that were released during the war, there wasn't a whole lot of dark comedy being released.
You know who popped in the mind here who probably kind of Cary Grant-esque? I don't know if he would have played it a little bit differently. What about like a Rock Hudson?
Been
or is this too early on in his career?
It might have been a little bit early.
I mean, I don't know what Rock Hudson was doing in the early 40s. I mean, I'm always thinking of all his Doris Day movies. That's
right.
Pretty much what I know Rock Hudson from.
Like I said, I like the idea of a Gary Cooper. I think he could pull it off.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think there are comedic actors that could have pulled it off. But here again, if what Ken's saying is true about the studio demanding Cary Grant be in there, Bob Hope was never going to be in this.
Bob Hope
because
he
he wouldn't
be released from his contract.
No, and plus, he wouldn't have been a big enough name. You've got to get somebody who's equal to Cary Grant if you're going to take him out of this movie, and I don't think Bob Hope at the time is equal to Cary Grant as far as a box office draw. That's where I kind of fall into a blank area as to where, okay, if you're taking that piece out and Warner Brothers is demanding somebody of his stature, well, you're kind of stuck.
You could go with Jimmy Stewart. He's popular, but I don't think he's still Cary Grant popular yet. I think Gary Cooper makes the most sense out of all the actors. He's a Frank Capra actor from Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Make a lot of sense for him to be in this role. And he could do a little bit more of the deadpan type of reactions.
Gary Cooper in 41 was doing Pride of the Yankees.
There you go.
And he was doing Sergeant York, For Whom the Bells Toll in 43.
He turned into a serious actor.
Yeah, he was pretty occupata.
And like I said, that's probably why we get Cary Grant anyway, is because who else is left? Like I said earlier, Capra wanted to distance himself from the movies that he had already made. So I don't think people like Gary Cooper and Jimmy Stewart are going to be considered in this movie because he's purposely trying to go into a different direction.
No, I completely get it. It is a different vein for him. This wouldn't have been the only movie that would have been upended by Pearl Harbor. Maybe because he's distracted into wanting to go away to war. Maybe they delay this movie until he comes back. Maybe we get a different view too.
Yeah, but that might be even harder to even still do because it's not like you could do reshoots then as well because you're 2 years later.
And there are other projects that you're going to be put on.
Yeah, there's other projects. I just think it was one of those things where the finished product is what it is because of what had happened. It's not bad. Most audiences at the time really enjoyed it, and most critics at the time really enjoyed it as well. People thought highly of this movie at this time. Maybe 2022 eyes look at it a little bit differently than what we see in 1944. Well, going back to the actors, the one person, of course, we haven't even remotely talked about is Priscilla Lane, who plays Elaine. Very underused in this particular movie.
The fiancé?
The wife. I mean,
the wife.
Married.
You're right. She doesn't
even
need to be in the movie. Let's be honest. She's extremely underused.
Really underused, and she seems like a very sweet character. And I love the dynamic we see at the beginning of the movie where
Yeah.
You know, they try to get married. He runs away because he got noticed. He gives her that speech about why he can't get married, and she just gives him that look. And he just melts and decides to get married. Their playfulness at the beginning of the movie is fun. But then after that, they just crap all over it.
I understand where they're coming from. So you've got this new love, you got a new bride, a new wife, everything is playful, and then you're going back home to meet your family, and all of a sudden you find out that your aunts have killed 13 people. I mean, that's a mind overload. How would you react? And then you have a needy wife who wants all of your attention, which you want to give her, but you found out your family's a serial killer, and you got one that's thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt, and then you have the long-lost brother, and is just a complete psychopath, too. I guess my question is, why was Mortimer so focused on getting Teddy in the insane asylum?
If he gets Teddy out there, then his aunts have no one to help them bury the bodies, so they may give up on trying to kill these men to begin with.
That was weak. I think that's a weak...
Well, here's the reason why it works, is because Teddy has already been judged as insane.
He is insane.
Yeah, but they're already expecting him in the insane asylum. They already are waiting for him, but they're just waiting for a few more years because they have too many Teddy Roosevelts as it is right now. They need more.
Well,
he's not going to go to the insane asylum until the sisters pass away.
Right, but they know he's going to come, but later on because of that, is what I'm saying. And they don't want to take him now either because of the Teddy Roosevelt problem.
That's actually funny. That
is a running gag. That is funny, yeah.
We tried to get him to play George Washington once, but then he just sat there and wouldn't play anything. He wouldn't do anything at all. I just don't like how she is treated by her husband. It's one thing
I don't like it either.
Put her on the back burner. It's another thing to kind of almost be abusive to her.
Well, especially after Jonathan tries to kill her, and he just overlooks like it's nothing. Glazes over it.
He's like, don't worry about it. It's okay. But, I mean, your brother is totally insane, and he's willing to kill. And the first person, when she says, I was almost killed, and he looks at his aunts, of course.
Right.
Like, how could you? And they're like, no, we didn't do it. It was your brother. And he's like, oh, well, that's okay then.
Yeah, that's Jonathan.
That's just Jonathan being Jonathan. But he picks her up and kind of throws her out of the house. He's rude to her on the phone. He's just totally abusive to her. And it would have just made more sense where he just made more excuses after excuses, but been nice about it.
Definitely.
I mean, he's sane enough to try to get Teddy into the insane asylum and to get the doctor to sign the papers and things of that nature. He's thinking straight on those type of matters. He needs to be thinking straight about his new wife. I don't like that scenario. It probably would have been better just assuming that he was married and us not even ever seeing her. And if he wants to be rude to her, just be rude to her on the phone or something like that. I like her. She seems like...
I do too.
And then the thing is, she has a relationship with the ants, you know, and she does find out at the end that there are bodies buried under the cellar. Why not it be her that finds out? Trying to tell him throughout the whole time frame that his aunts are murderers. That would have been, I think, an interesting twist to it.
I agree with what you're saying about her. I really do like her as an actress, and I like the character as well. I don't like the way that Mortimer treats her. I think it's troublesome, to put it mildly. One thing that I did take, I don't know if it's a hole, but it is something I couldn't ignore. You have the cops that keep coming around. There's nothing to prevent Mortimer from telling the cops there's bodies in the basement and Jonathan did it.
Okay, here's the other thing. Jonathan, he's in the insane asylum, right?
I thought he was in jail.
No, it was he escaped from a mental institution.
He broke out of an insane asylum? Okay.
They should know who he is and who he's related to.
But they kind of allude to this. The one cop who thinks he's going to be a playwright, one of the complaints that the other cops have that the lieutenant tells them is that nobody reads any of the be on the lookouts on the wall in the police department. So we get right there that he's not paying attention to people that they should be on the lookout for.
But I think that would be also the job of the lieutenant to tell these people, hey, you're on this beat. These people live at this house. They have a nephew that is an escaped mental patient. You need to be on the lookout. So it shouldn't be just more than just a piece of paper pinned up to a wall. It's a way out, that's for sure. It's an excuse at the end of why they don't arrest this guy a little bit sooner. I do love the little cat and mouse game between the brothers. You think Mortimer thinks that nobody knows about the body that's in the windowsill, And he thinks that his aunts did it again until they both race back and try to sit down on it. And then he realizes,
That was good.
There's some great comic timings in here. Like I said, when Cary Grant first discovers the first body, the look on it and his reaction is pretty fun. And then when he finds the second body, I like his reaction. A lot of times I do like his reactions, but there are occasional times where those reactions, like you said, dial to 11. And I don't know if I like the mumbling at the end when he's on the staircase and he's just kind of mumbling to himself a little bit about what's...
While there's chaos going all around.
I'd rather see the chaos. I'd rather see the cops taking on the brother and, trying to get him down. But no, we have to focus on his reactions. I don't like his crazy part at the end where he's trying to get them to think he's crazy so they don't go downstairs in the basement. I think there's too much going on at the end. For me, almost torpedoes the movie.
I agree with what you're saying quite a bit. The one part I do like when he's mumbling on the stairs is Jonathan gets shoved up against the stairs and he asks him for the phone. I actually thought that was kind of amusing. Like I said, there's a lot of moments here that I actually did laugh. That was one of them. But yeah, I don't like the fact that he tries to play crazy and he starts to charge up the stairs. And then when his wife comes up the stairs and she's talking about 13 bodies and all he does is he kisses her to make her be quiet. That's where you're selling the rest of the character, especially a character like the lieutenant, who is kind of like a relatively smart person. You're selling that character down the river because, okay, now you have another party saying that there's 13 bodies in the basement. Why aren't we going down to check it out?
Do it twice.
Exactly.
Have Jonathan say it, and then have his wife come up, getting ready to say it as well. But then he's quieted by Mortimer. He kisses her, takes her outside. And then what I think you could do, you have Witherspoon then sit down and complain about his life to the aunts, and then they offer him wine, and then you fade to black. We don't know if they kill him. That's where it ends. It ends with them offering him the wine, and it fades to black.
You should have been an Epstein.
That's how I would have loved to see this movie end. I think the ending is atrocious with the I'm a teacup and then kissing her and bringing her all the way back to her dad's house. I think the minister wouldn't be very happy to see you running into the house making out with his daughter.
That was very, very awkward. To say the least.
Considering he wasn't on board with the whole idea of him getting married to begin with.
Don't know if that's how the play ends. I believe that the play ends differently because Mortimer is not the focus of the play, but at the end of the day, I still enjoy the movie.
So let's talk about our reviews of this movie. I will kick it off. So like I said, this movie, I saw it this week for the first time, watched it 2 times. It's an interesting movie. I have to say, the build-up of this movie, I was very, very excited to watch this for the first time. And I watched through the movie, and I was really disappointed, is really the way I could say it. So I gave it a few days, I watched it again, and unfortunately, my disappointment was still there. I agree with Ted. Cary Grant should not have been in this role. I don't think he dialed it up to 11, but he definitely was not made for this role. He definitely was the odd man out. I don't think his comedic timing was anywhere near what this role was written for. I still think Jimmy Stewart should have played it. I know Ken disagrees, but overall, it didn't click for me. The characters were unique. I will say that. I couldn't really bond with any of them. Maybe it's just the age of the movie and the comedic timing of the 1940s is just something I just can't get into. This is definitely a Frank Capra movie. I could see his directing and his writing all over this thing. I really would like to see the play version. Maybe one of these days if it's ever out at the theater houses or Broadway or something, who knows. It would be very interesting to see this thing as a play. But as a movie, I just couldn't get into it. It was not the worst thing I've ever seen, but it clearly wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen. I love Cary Grant as an actor. I love a lot of his movies, and I don't think this role was made for him. I definitely understand why he was saying negative things about this role, and it was the worst role he's ever played, and really did not want this movie to be released, and probably was not proud of it overall. For me, this movie is a solid C. It's something I probably won't ever watch again, but I'm glad I watched it. But it's average. Doesn't do it for me. How about you, Ted? What are your thoughts?
This might be one of the toughest.
It's a tough one. I know, right? It's tough.
Yeah, this has got to be one of the toughest ones that I've had to put a grade on, because it's almost putting things on a scale to see which side gets the advantage. There's a lot of things that I do like about this movie. There are parts I legitimately find funny all the times that I watched it. I love watching and seeing new movies that I've not seen before. And if you tell me that this is a Cary Grant movie and it's Frank Capra, I had come in with a certain expectation. I was shocked the first time. It was not what I was expecting, we'll put it that way. But some of the characters are very endearing to me, and I do really like them, and I can see where this is a memorable movie. For me personally, I can never imagine me saying that I didn't care for Cary Grant in a role. I don't like him in this movie. The character is okay. I think the character could be done better. That's just so weird for me to have to say, because I like Cary Grant a lot. I'm going to give this movie a C+, because I think it's a little bit better than average. There are parts that I really do like, and there are characters that I really like. There's a couple of characters that I'll probably never forget. There's something about it that I just can't get behind. Unfortunately, like I said, it's a C+ for me. But it's a really, really tough C+.
So if Cary Grant wasn't in the movie, if a different actor was in it, you think you would give it a better grade?
Well, see, this is where I'm torn.
Yeah.
Because I guess at the end of the day, why it's a C+ is because I can't tell whether or not this is Cary Grant's fault or if it's Frank Capra's fault for letting him play this way. I want to like the movie. I think it's a good story. That's why it's a C+. I just can't get over his acting. It's crazy.
Fair enough. How about you, Ken? What are your thoughts on this one?
I think Cary Grant can be a funny actor. He does other movies that are funny. He's got a lot of charisma, and that's why, he's a top draw. That's why he's in this movie, because he has the ability to be a lot of different things. This over-top expectation was maybe a little bit too far to play, but I do think he does do a decent job. There are times where, yes, I do get frustrated, but in general, I think he does just fine. I think he's hard on himself, and I think we also can be hard on him too, because we've seen him do so many other movies at high quality. Philadelphia Story, North by Northwest, just to name a couple. And when you make classic movies like those movies, when you see a movie like this, and the way how oddball it is, you can easily just pick it apart, because it's not the typical Cary Grant role. I do think the other actors are really good in this. Raymond Massey is evil. When he jumps through that window, when he opens up those curtains, I jumped. And I don't jump at black and white movies pretty much anymore. But
I think we can all agree that Peter Lorre is really good in this.
Oh, Peter Lorre steals every scene that he's in. He's the most lovable bad guy that's out there. We want him to be good. We want him to survive. We don't want anything bad to happen to him, even though he's probably been his accomplice for a while. I really do like the ladies that play the aunts, Josephine Hull and Jean, I believe it's pronounced Adair. They're sweethearts, especially Josephine Hull, because she's the one that actually kills the guy at the beginning of the film, and she has a little bit more screen time than the other aunt. She's just enjoyable to watch. And their reasoning and the way that they're convincing on how they're doing right and how other things bother them, like a scary movie is inappropriate and certain language is inappropriate, and these off comments here and there, like, oh, he's a nice looking man for a Methodist. It's just kind of weird to say those type of things. I can see why this was a successful play, because the aunts are awesome. And John Alexander plays Teddy, does a great job. If you led the charge like a couple of times, I think that character is played perfectly. But the problem with this movie for me, as I said towards the end of this podcast, is the way that the ending feels a little rushed. Everything is not played out the way it could have been. I think there could have been better edits. Like I said, I'm a teapot. It just drives me up the wall. And it downgrades my grade. Originally, I would have gone with a B+ on this movie, but the way that the movie ends with all the craziness, and it's okay to be crazy at the end, but I think there needs to be a controlled crazy, and I think Capra loses it, and it might be because they're running out of time to get this movie out. So I'm going to settle with the B grade. It is rewatchable for me. It's one of those movies that will remind me of my mother. It is a movie that I cherish. I have the Criterion Collection version of this movie, so I will definitely watch it in the upcoming future. But because of the ending, it stands as a B.
All right. Well, thank you for that review. So overall, we're all kind of like about average. That's all right.
Nobody hated it.
No. And
I didn't hate it.
I am glad that you picked this movie. I'm glad that I watched it because I've known about it for years, but it's just been off my radar recently, so I'm glad I sat down and to watch it. You know what? It's probably going to lead me to watch more Cary Grant movies because I haven't watched Cary Grant movies, prior to the Yankees. And I haven't seen those movies in years.
That's Gary Cooper.
Gary Cooper. I'm sorry, Philadelphia Story, North by Northwest, especially Alfred Hitchcock.
That's my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yes, Hitchcock. I'm like, come on.
When I think of Cary Grant, I think of Cary Grant in that movie. And
definitely.
He's so cool.
I know.
I think of him as a cool guy, not as this guy.
Okay. We'd like to thank everyone for listening to our review of Arsenic and Old Lace. So, Ken, what is the next movie we are going to be looking at?
Well, we're going to shift gears. We're going to get Frank Capra, and we're going to go into Mel Brooks, specifically Mel Brooks movies with Gene Wilder. But we got a double treat for you on our next episode. We're going to do The Producers, the original Producers with Gene Wilder. And then we're going to go to the later version, the musical version of The Producers with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. And we're going to compare the two and see which ones we like, which scenes we like, which actors we like better, and overall what movie we like better.
I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a great
So are we going to
review.
watch Springtime for Hitler?
Yeah.
In Germany, yeah. And then after that, we're going to go and touch on Blazing Saddles, also with Gene Wilder. And then we're going to finish up with Young Frankenstein, starring Gene Wilder.
How about that? So if you guys
it's
are all...
Frankenstein.
If you're Mel Brooks fans, stay tuned. You're going to get a treat with these. I am definitely looking forward to watching these movies again.
Me too.
Well, Ted, where can they find us out there and on the World Wide Web?
We can be found on Twitter at hookedon_movies. And also, too, whatever podcast version you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, or Anchor, if you can, leave us a rating and review. It helps us be able to get seen by more people, and it really does help because the more reviews we get, that opens up more opportunities for us.
Wonderful. Ken, what's going on Facebook?
You can join us on Facebook, Hooked on Movies. Just send us a request to join the group and jump into our discussions. We talk about the movies that we reviewed, topics of the day. Also check out us on the Dorkening Network. We are a part of that network along with a bunch of other podcasters. So check that out to see maybe there's other podcasts that you will enjoy. There's just a lot to choose from on that, so enjoy it. So jump onto our Facebook page, ask us questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Throw out some movies that you want to see also on, or some movies that you want to hear, because you don't want to see us. That's why we have voice for podcasting and not for video. But we look forward to seeing you on the Facebook page.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. I want to thank everyone for listening. And as always, I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.